Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm here with my 2 co-hosts, Danielle and Teresa. How are you ladies today?
Great.
Wonderful.
You look great. It's we're having a great fall in New England. You know, we all live in different areas, California, Florida, and Cape Cod, New England. Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. So how are you guys doing with weather?
It's a little foggy and cool here, but it's a refreshing change from the humidity.
Yeah, Florida, foggy and cool. Wow.
I like it.
But the breadbasket over there in San Joaquin Valley and Fresno, that must be nice.
It's a little foggy too, actually.
Oh, really?
Wow,
You
yeah.
sometimes have these huge pileups on 99, don't you?
Yeah.
With fog and like
It's funny that it's
200
yes,
cars or something.
yes.
Jesus.
It's funny that someone who lives so far away knows that. But you've also lived close, right, Roger? So.
Yeah. I was almost involved in one once.
Oh, I
driving
see.
to your house.
Oh boy.
Well, talk about pileups. You know, we all today we're building on a previous podcast that had to do with self-coaching, I guess, for want of a better word, but how we navigate through the world, particularly with our heads being the way they are, and how we see ourselves. And I love that one, but we wanted to build on it. So we all share the fact that we're human, right? And so there's some core characteristics of who we are as humans, but each one of us is kind of unique. We are unique in our experiences and how we see the world, but really importantly, how we see ourselves, because aren't we learning that view of ourselves, call it anything, self-concept, self-beliefs, mindset, all of those things that apply to that makes a huge difference in our success and failure as how we navigate the world and deal with troubles and stress, and whether we're successful or how we see ourselves. It's huge. So I think we're all nodding, and I think we should definitely drill down deeper into that idea of how we see ourselves. Maybe we can put some paint on the canvas regarding this, you know, get it a little more tangible, because it's kind of an abstract concept. So Teresa, you must be ready to go.
I'm ready to go. I know Danielle is too.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yes. And I think people by and large recognize it too. Like I just wrote a blog called How to Get Out of Your Own Way. And I titled it that because many, many people who come to me for coaching, this would be widowed people, will say, here's the problem and here's what I want for myself, but the obstacle is me. And I can't get out of my own way. I'm the problem. I'm the obstacle. And so I think there's some awareness of like, I am my worst enemy. And I think people realize too, that they're their own worst judge. There's so much we could talk about here. Danielle, is that your experience as well?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I coach a completely different population. They're usually career changers, people writing books and launching podcasts, but it's the same thing of, you know, getting out of their own way and that whole self-regard, like, I'm not good enough to be doing this. Who do I think I am to be doing this? So this is a great, great conversation.
You know, we all share something in common. We've all written books, and I know my experience was I wrote a book, you know, Live Long, Die Short, about healthy longevity. That it took a long time to get started with that, because I was talking negatively to myself. I mean, there's so many good books out there. What can I add to this? There's the little literature on this. And that was a huge stumbling block. And thankfully, it wasn't one I couldn't penetrate, but I needed a little help to penetrate it.
And it's related specifically to books, Roger, but it can relate to anything. People ask me, how long did it take to write your trilogy? And I'm like, well, the first one, 5 years. The second one, 6 months, the last one, 4 months. And the biggest stumbling block, not just yourself, but the this is the way you have to do it. This is the way it's always been done. These are the rules for how to write a book. And you could take that and put that in any context. Like, these are the rules of the world. And if you don't follow them, you're doing it wrong. And it's getting out of those ideas that you're doing it wrong.
I don't want to get us off track, but I know it's related. You've all heard the term, we choose to be happy. So, I mean, even as something as basic as happiness, which I think most of us feels comes from the outside world, is really a question of how we view the world and the decisions we make and how we view the world. So something even as basic as that. Well, why don't we start breaking it down? All of these self beliefs or self concepts. Why don't we break them down to get some meat on this topic?
Yeah. And I would contend that happiness and any other emotion is an inside job. Environment matters, where we live matters, all of that does matter, but it creates an environment where we're more likely to think certain thoughts that lead to certain feelings. So I personally think every feeling is an inside job. And for sure, if we're in our own way, thinking negative thoughts about ourselves, doubting ourselves, having those limiting beliefs floating around in our subconscious, mind you, because we've thought them so often that in the spirit of efficiency, the brain files them away in the subconscious. So we don't even really think them word for word, so they can get really hidden. It's hard to dig them up, but we surely operate according to them. And so I think what we're trying to do today is help people dig up their beliefs that aren't in their conscious mind.
So a lot of what comes up in coaching for me is basically self-regard and how people think about themselves, which is not the same as self-esteem. Self-esteem is, I have confidence, I am great, but you need to have the tools to back it up or else you don't even believe what you're saying. Self-regard is about being able to equally see, these are my strengths, these are my opportunities for growth or areas where there's a little weakness, and have a clear sight and love yourself anyway. And treat yourself with compassion anyway. And when we lack that self-regard, we lack that self-compassion, that's when we get into the, why bother? Nothing's going to change. I can't do this and I'm not motivated to change. So self-regard is just a huge, developing that to me is a huge first step in accomplishing what you want to accomplish, feeling the way you want to accomplish. And Roger, as you're saying, finding the happiness and joy that you're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't so it really starts at the basics as to how you see yourself. What is your identity in the world? We all have labels. We're husbands, wives, professionals, children, sons and daughters, fathers, son, all of that. But beyond that, who we are. And as you were saying, the self-regard. Might some people be stumbled over thinking, depending upon how they were raised, with humility, confusing this with humility versus being, haughty or proud or obsessed with yourself? That probably is a barrier to being able to see yourself more accurately. Do you think?
I'm glad you brought that up. When I talk a lot about positive psychology and the work of Barbara Fredrickson, and when leading mindfulness groups, she talks about all these components to happiness: joy, awe, wonder, and she mentions pride. And whenever I say pride, people are like, "Oh, but pride is bad." But in the context that we're talking about is, you can take joy and say, I did this, and feel good about it without it being that boastful. And oftentimes the pride that we think of when we think of the negative context is, there's nothing to back it up. It's, I am great, I have this confidence, but I have nothing, there's no substance behind it. And here, that's different to me than when you accomplish something and you can say, wow, I did that.
Kaizen can help us with that. If you have something big you want to do and you fail all the time doing something big, it's like we've talked about with change. If you do it in small steps, or the Kaizen method, you can be proud of that small step, and build on that. I'm sure that's probably a way to, or at least one way to overcome that. But I know Teresa's got something. She's ready to go.
Well, research suggests that we think about 60,000 thoughts a day, which is a lot of thoughts, and that there's perhaps an 80% negativity bias that's happening. right? That's our primitive brain doing its job, keeping us alive. So it can be really easy to say there are no wins. There's just failure. I've screwed this up. I'm not who I could have been, right? It could be that record that just plays in our head. And if that's true, that only means that you have a normal human brain functioning correctly, primitive brain, right? So that's okay. With my clients, we on purpose twice a week articulate what the wins are. What are you proud of? What was hard, but you did it anyway? And it could be so small and it could be so big, but it's training the brain to change that channel, right? And seek what you are proud of, the genuine things that you are proud of. Because most people who I interact with are not boastful. In fact, they're the opposite. They're like, I'm screwing this up. So it's a good practice to document your wins. Why don't we do that? We should do that and celebrate them.
And this is related to self-compassion, isn't it? Because we fail. And if when we fail, we throw in the towel and say, I'm garbage and can never do this, and put the picture of a pig on my refrigerator, that sort of thing, that's very detrimental, I think, to success, isn't it?
Because we make failure mean something about us. Right.
And it's just failure, which we all do. It's not about our character, right? Is that basically?
It's a fail. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. And in fact, if you believe that you learn more from failure, right, then that could be our currency. We could be hungry to fail because of the lessons learned, and never does it make us a failure.
What did Edison say? He invented the light bulb and he tried 10,000 times, and they say, how did you do that? He said, well, I didn't fail. I had 10,000 ways to not build a light bulb,
Exactly.
A lot of that, what I love about, say, appreciative inquiry does exactly what Teresa suggested. When you have somebody think any time frame, something that happened in your life that was just a wonderful experience. It doesn't even have to be a success, just a wonderful experience. And guaranteed, as they're talking about it, they're getting excited. They were involved in that experience in a way that they were proud of how they showed up. And it gets people thinking about what their strengths are. And that's a hard thing to ask when you're talking about people with low self-regard or low self-efficacy, meaning they don't think they can do it. To be able to ask them, what strengths do you see in yourself? How would your friend describe you? If you're not sure and you asked a friend, how would they describe you? And then just kind of holding a mirror up to some of those good things, because I do think we're in a culture we're more likely to look at our bad things.
Yeah, well, don't we know that people who look at the world as half full live much longer, 7.5 years or more longer? I'm sure it's related to this. And it's, it's not that they do everything supremely well or anything, or that the world is beautiful all the time, or the world is just all the time. I mean, we all know that's not true. But if they look through a lens, and it's not being Pollyanna. Anyway, if we're not Pollyanna about it, but there's nothing to say we can't just look at the positive side of thing and choose to not focus on the negative, as you said before, Teresa.
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content, enabling informed decisions. Powered by Masterpiece can support your community in the critical areas of focus that drive healthy longevity for your residents, staff, and community. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
It's never been easier, I don't think, in society to compare and despair, because social media is so in our faces, and everyone's highlight reel looks so perfect. And it's our brains very naturally want to put things into two quick categories, right or wrong, right? So the compare and despair happens so readily. So it takes, I would offer maybe that it takes more effort these days to see the glass half full than maybe it did before.
Wow, that's a good point. Geez, my goodness. It seems like we're in the technology and the internet has given us an environment that makes all this probably a little more difficult if we're too hard on ourselves.
So
Danielle?
I happened to read this quote from Aristotle this morning, and I love it. And he says, it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. So to be able to, in some ways, distance yourself and just think, I am not that thought. I'm having a thought, whether it's I'm a good person, I'm a bad person. It's just a thought. And how are we going to, we can choose to accept it or we can choose to not accept it. And I've heard Teresa say this many times. It's like, how do you want to feel? Is this serving you? If not, maybe it's not a good thought.
Yeah. And are you willing to just be plain wrong about what you're thinking? Or what if the complete opposite is true? And are you willing to make your brain do the work of exploring that? Just that willingness to consider that you might be 100% wrong, that alone cracks the door open, and we don't know what happens from there.
No, this is all related in the professional sense, in the therapy sense, not the coaching, the therapy sense, with cognitive behavior therapy. The whole point is beliefs. As you said this many times, both of you, beliefs drive emotions, which drive actions. And so it's what we believe. And there is a prejudice towards the negative, as Teresa says, that brown spot over there, that's just a rock. Oh, I was wrong. It's a lion. I'm dead. We tend to be conservative about things. And so we're kind of wired to be half empty, actually, for survival. And it's all related to this. But again, that's in the therapy range. But we're not talking therapy here, but we're talking about, navigating the world ourselves. Yes, Danielle.
What you're saying is some great building blocks. So you're starting with your self-regard and being able to see yourself good and bad and accept yourself as it is, which leads to that self-efficacy. And the self-efficacy is, I believe I can do this. I can change. I can go after whatever goal. But even within self-efficacy, the next part is your personal skills, your personal beliefs about yourself, and also your environment. Because a lot, we can't discount somebody in an environment where they're getting support that they need versus an environment where when you start to change your beliefs, you're getting shot down like, oh, no, that's not right. And it's really hard at those beginning stages when you don't feel strong to have everybody say you're wrong.
We all deal in the field of aging. Teresa, not so much lately, but I think some of your clients fall into that category. But we've talked about this as ageism and marginalizing older adults and putting them off to society and basically regarding them and treating them, and in the press and in the media and in our cultural decisions and our public policy, that they are on the margins of society and really have no potential or anything to give. And that has quite programmed many people to believe that, if they believe that, and how that has caused so much disease, lower quality of life. So this and it's all related to being human. Go figure.
Indeed.
So how would we close this? What are the nuggets that we can give someone as they navigate the world and realize, that perhaps they're their biggest impediment to being what they want to be and feeling the way they want to? And Teresa's ready to jump again.
I think the secret ingredient here is love. And, if we can be good at eavesdropping on our own thoughts and monitoring the chatter that happens inside of our own brains, is it the same love that we would talk with someone who we cared deeply about? And probably it isn't. So step one, be a good court reporter and just document, monitor what's happening inside your brain. That awareness alone is a game changer. And then we get to become an editor of what we allow that talk to happen in our brains. And I think telling our story is what we can do. How do you tell your story? And is it with love, right? What do you believe about yourself? Who are you? And who do you want to be? Those are some very good questions to at least examine your relationship with yourself and start to see where you might be in your own way.
Powerful. I know As I was a kid, I heard very frequently is love starts with yourself. You have to love yourself before you can love another. I mean, that many people, as we've said, with the humility part, can consider that arrogant or in some ways, but no, not at all. I mean, if you can't, I believe, I've come to believe that what I was taught, that you can't fully love someone if indeed your foundation yourself is rotting, is not one based on love of yourself, and that's accepting you warts and all, right? And but just not focusing on the warts and knowing that you can do great things and good things and not get in the way. Danielle, you got some closing comments?
What both of you said was beautiful. So I have no more advice, just a practical tool that I love. It's used a lot in positive psychology, and it's a great resource. And I'll put the link in the description of this podcast, VIA Character Strengths. It's a free test that you go through, and it helps you identify what your strengths are, what your values are. And then once you say, okay, if you value love and social connection, then it's going to give you tools like, here's one step you might think about to cultivate those strengths. So it's just a good tool to have in your toolbox for people who maybe are listening and want to take some concrete steps to keep the process going.
I feel like I've been in a warm hug here with being human, with you guys, and I hope our listeners do too. Any closing comments beyond that?
I love you guys.
Beautiful. Yes, ditto. Absolutely.
Feeling is mutual.
Thank you. This was very nice, and I can't help but think that anyone listening to this is going to feel a little bit better about their lives and what they can accomplish. And if that's the case, mission accomplished for us too. Thank you very much, ladies.
My pleasure.
We want to continue to provide information that is valuable and reliable to our listeners. We welcome your comments and suggestions for topics that are important to you. Please see the description of this episode to contact the Brightside team. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.